to Books Are Good Medicine, a podcast sponsored by the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community, featuring books and other Native American-focused teaching resources. We are your hosts, Allison Waka
and Odia Krieger. Today we're speaking with author and poet Heid Erdrich in her home in Minneapolis. Heid is a writer from North Dakota who curates art exhibits, teaches, researches, and collaborates with other artists. She's Ojibwe and enrolled at Turtle Mountain.
Heid has written 7 collections of poetry and has taught writing for decades. She is the 2024 Minneapolis Poet Laureate, and her writing has won many awards, including 2 Minnesota Book Awards for poetry.
We talked with Heid about her role as Poet Laureate, career and experience teaching writing in classrooms and communities. Enjoy.
Hello, Heid.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
We can start off with saying, like, if someone doesn't know you by now, what would you introduce yourself as? What would you say about a highlight of your work, let's say?
I'm Heid E. Erdrich. I'm currently the Poet Laureate of the city of Minneapolis. I'm the inaugural Poet Laureate for the year 2024.
Oh, it's so good to hear that. I'm like, can you repeat that? I just hear clapping in my head when you say that.
Well, it was funny because I was like, say your last name again, nice and loud, so that everyone can hear it. Because I always remember, and I'm not going to give any samples, but everyone screws up your last name. So can you say it again for us?
My name is Heid E. Erdrich. People can pronounce it Erdrich, but remember, we're not rich. It's not Erdrich or Erdrich.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I've heard every iteration, and I remember you saying, like, come on, people, like, let's get this right. This is how it is. So thank you for reiterating.
I go through the same kind of with my last name. It's always Wakau, Waku. And I don't even know how the U's ended up in my name, in all honesty. So it's a hard, especially when you say it over and over again.
Is it Waka?
Waka.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
You say it right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm like, did I get it wrong all these years?
No. It's like all the teachers that you've had over, you know what I mean? When they call your name and you're just like, don't even bother.
But I do appreciate people
getting
saying,
it right.
Yeah, Erdrich or Erdrich, because it's also important to me that to put the E in the middle of my name, because I grew up with a longer name, and some people still shorten it to Heid E or Heidi.
Oh.
But I prefer to be Heid. So at least on paper, I'm Heid E for those who once knew me.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
So folks will be like, where are they right now? And I'm so grateful that we are in your very secret little hidey hole that's your writing studio. And we were discussing before we got on air that for those of us who are lucky enough to be friends with you on Facebook, that you shared some of this process with us. And it is an absolute joy to be in this space. And it feels so good to be here. You've done a beautiful job. Allison, I don't know if you do this, but when I see someone like on a Zoom presentation and they have a bookcase behind them, I'm always squinting. I'm like, all right, what are they reading? What books are they? So can you tell us about this incredible collection that's behind us?
Yeah, these are some of my many books. There's other places with books, but I basically turned an old falling down garage into my studio and my writing study and a library. So poetry doesn't take up a lot of room because they're slim volumes. So believe it or not, there are like 1,000 poetry books in here somewhere. The middle section is reserved for my family's books, and there's multiples of some of them, as well as my own books and books that I still need to read. Then there's a Native literature section, and elsewhere in the room, there's a Dakota and Ojibwe section, specifically, books written by Ojibwe people. There's a few about Ojibwe people by people from other cultures, but for the most part, that's where the books are broken into. There's an art section too, because I work with visual artists and I love visual artists. So
So I will say, if you are listening to this podcast, folks need to get on YouTube so they can actually legit see your creative process, because it's just so beautiful. And
Thank you.
the items that you have. And
Thank you.
you probably look around too and think about like different, pun intended, I guess, different chapters of your life represented all around you.
Yeah, for sure. And I have that sort of, imbuing objects with stories thing. So yeah, there is quite a bit of that. I do have to note my 2 Minnesota Book Awards are holding up my books over there. Thank you, Minnesota, for being such a great place to be a writer. And, I know so many of these writers and scholars that I've worked with, and it's just a great thing to look back at your lifetime and see, titles that will allow you to revisit memories, to check in on ideas that influenced you, to look for recipes. I also have a cookbook collection, so it's a beautiful thing. Lines from poems. When people pass from my life, I make a special little display of their books so that I can have that moment for a year after they've gone. And when new books come into my life, they also have a special place so I can keep looking at them. So yeah, it's a great experience. And eventually I want others to be able to come here and use the library as well.
To inspire others and even more work.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope it helps them with their work. Yeah, their writing and their scholarly projects, maybe even.
To add to your collection.
Yeah, I could add them after they write them. Yeah, that's a good idea. I have to not be a dragon and hoard the books. I do give away a lot of books too, because it's not the quantity, it's the selection for me.
I really love giving books away to people that, I think you might enjoy this, and keeping an eye out. I think my grandpa would really like this one, or that's giving books is certainly a joy of mine. I love doing that.
Understand Native Minnesota, we did a number of big book campaigns for that narrative change campaign. It was so funny. We were working with someone who's like, oh God, not another book giveaway. And it was just because we just kept doing them, because for me, it's the same thing. Like giving people access, like there's nothing better than the gift of a book. And so I was like, book campaign, book campaign, book campaign. And I just remember them saying, yay, it's another book campaign.
Oh my goodness.
But it was just so much fun. And that was one of the things I admired about your work when you were with Hennepin County, because you would always make sure books were accessible. Yeah. And so.
Then new books. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely grew up in a time when you didn't just get books. There weren't bookstores in small towns. I mean, I don't think I saw a bookstore on a reservation until the past 5-10 years. So having books close by that you could access was not an easy thing. So getting a book for free was amazing. I remember those Scholastic days where if you are able to save up your money and get books, you might get a free one. Oh my gosh, that was huge. But we didn't have many books in my house growing up. Books were, loaned from the library. And luckily we had access to some really good libraries in North Dakota where I grew up. But yeah, I wasn't able to buy books of my own until I was in high school. And yes, I still have those books.
So you briefly mentioned your family, and I think we would be remiss not to mention your incredible siblings. And you grew up with this incredible network of support, but now you are helping to create this incredible network of support. And that's one of the things that's been just so soul fulfilling for me, is as we talk with different writers and illustrators through this process, everyone says how tight the network of Native writers are.
Yeah.
And so I know that you support a bunch of people. In addition to publishing and you writing all of these things, you also are an incredible mentor to people. And what are some projects you're working on, assisting with, leading right now?
That's a really good question. I am working with a group at the Loft, mentoring them and producing their own first manuscript of poetry. And that's been a wonderful experience. It's a year-long program, and was happy that there were some Native writers in the program. And I will do that again if everything works out in 2026. So that formal process is really a fun one for me, and something that kind of uses my teaching skills, because I was a college teacher and university teacher for a long time. And every now and then I still go away somewhere and teach, which I'm doing in the coming year at University of Montana, Missoula. I'll be there. Jim Welch, writer in residence, which is exciting.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and I knew James Welch, so it makes me very proud to be able to do something in his name. And then I'm editing a series with the Minnesota Humanities Center and Learner Books, a series of biographies for schools. And this is the second go round of it. The first 3 books were published for the Humanities Center and distributed by the Humanities Center. And now there's a partnership with Learner Books to not only republish those 3 books, but to add many more books to the series. So I'm working with Gwen Westerman, our poet laureate of the state of Minnesota. And between the two of us, we're doing Dakota Ojibwe and one Ojibwe Métis subject in the next few years. So I'm working right now on the manuscripts, leaders, artists, people from the 19th century, early 20th, mid to late 20th, and then a few from the current times.
Oh, that's so exciting. You two are rock stars.
It's fun work. It really is. And I'm really grateful to the Humanities Center and the Shakopee Midwakanton for making the project possible, and Learner Books.
It seems like when I was a child, there was nothing on the horizon, and now I feel like there's Native heroes and sheroes that are, for my kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, imagine how it was for me. I mean, there was a biography of Maria Tallchief that I read in the library at the school that my parents taught at, which was a BIA boarding school. And there was, that's where I went to see books about Native people. And I don't think any of them were by Native people that I'm aware of. But that's, there were a few things that I saw there. And the first book I published was a biography of Maria Tallchief, the Osage prima ballerina. So, yeah, things have come a long way. And when I graduated from college, there were only 11 Native PhDs in the whole country. And since then I've gotten a doctorate, and everybody I know is working on one at least.
Someone we know.
Yeah. So, but no, many, many more people are getting obviously college degrees, but we still have so much to do for the really way too many Native kids who don't make it through high school in Minnesota in particular.
I'm terrible with poetry. I'm just going to say I was a K-12, I would say more K-6 educator. But for me, I was always like, there are some poems I really love, and I'm like, oh, I'll read them, and they fill me up inside. But for the most part, I don't know what to do with poetry. And I'm wondering if you could help listeners in any way sort of solve the poetry mystery. I know that's a huge question.
Yeah, help us to digest. Like, what is it,
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that there's, some people are hesitant, or where do we engage poetry? I think that part of the problem is a PR problem. Poetry is considered sort of high-minded, but there are a lot of poets who are writing right out of the world that the same folks are writing lyrics to songs that everybody engages. Right. This is the same world, and poetry can be very similar. Poetry is a performed genre, so it's a type of literature that has to have voice in it, has to have human voice and personality. And so I think like the more exposure people get to poetry, the more they'll enjoy it. One thing I think people shouldn't do is think they have to figure out a book of poems if it doesn't grab them. You don't have to do it. It's not a puzzle. It's not, one of those things where you try and make your eyes blur so you can see. That's not how it works. That if that doesn't appeal to you, that's just not poetry for you. So, find something else that you like and listen to poets. Poets perform all the time. And while you're listening to them, you don't have to get everything they're saying. You don't get a song the first time you hear it on the radio, do you? It's like later it builds on you.
Right.
So, the same thing, the same exposure, I think, helps you to understand and deepen. And at different points in your life, you'll like different poets.
Right.
At different points of the day, I'll like different poets. I like a lot of different kinds of poets, and I find it really easy to move from something that's very complex and maybe older, from a tradition that's not my life, to somebody who is very current and also has an experience that's not my own through poetry. I'd have a harder time doing it with other genres, but with poetry, I can do that. It's small. It's made for today's audience who don't really engage for very long with literature.
I feel like poetry has the way, how do I say this? So like the way that it's written gives you the way that your mind, it makes you feel how your mind should be feeling while reading it. I don't know if I'm making sense there.
Yeah.
But like your first, for your new book, Little Big Bully. Yes. The first one, it's like the way they all are together. I was just like, at first when I was reading it, it just spoke to me. Like it just, there's no spaces, right? And it just kind of, it's
just a block of text,
right?
How.
But you pick out what is speaking to you, and at the same time, the run-on of all of it, I just felt, I felt really good about the way that we don't have to follow the rules anymore. Of like what our teachers were like, you can't have run-on sentences. You can't, poetry is very rebellious sometimes, where you can just,
I like that,
do how you are feeling it, thinking of it. And then it comes across the page in the way that it's written, And so, I was like, yes, third grade teacher that tells me I can't have any run-ons, you know what I mean? But it highlights what you're feeling and what you're thinking.
Yeah. And I mean, I think about it as working grammar really hard so that you are correct in your grammar, but you are moving at a pace. You're manipulating the page. You're manipulating punctuation.
Right.
That makes people forget that you're just using language, because there's going to be rhythm. There's going to be a look on the page. There's going to be a movement. There's going to be intellectual, there's an assumed question in that poem that you're talking about. So that's what's keeping you reading, even though there's no punctuation.
Yes.
You're just like, you're supplying it. The reader is doing something.
Yes.
And then they get caught up in it. And that's a poem called How, which is about like, how did we come to this? How did we get to the point we are as a society, as people, and it breaks down all the things that are kind of happening around my mind. How's this? How's that? How cold it is. And that I wrote that poem right before, one of the last elections. It's one of the oldest poems in the book.
And it's so fitting.
It's very, very fitting. I wrote it this time of year in when probably 2019. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like when I was reading it the other night, and my son, I was reading, and he goes and like we have a lamp, he turns the lamp off, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's bedtime. But I do, Alicia my sister got me a little book light so I can transition. But it's very, it seemed like how he thinks too, like why, what is it? He's got into that.
Exactly.
Like, yeah. This young mind of like, asking questions and just like the no filter, so, why don't we share when that, it's out now, right?
Little Big Bully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It came out in 2020 when I couldn't give readings and nobody, went to bookstores. So yeah, it did okay. Given that, it did okay. But yeah, and then I have another book that's coming out in December. So a new book called Verb Animate, and it's short essays and poems that I created with artists in other disciplines. So like sculptors, choreographers, filmmakers, or I made them to be installed in museums as visual art. So it's a selection of those poems and then prompts for others to write, like kind of have the same assignment that I was given, and to write about some of the subjects that I was writing about. So it's a hybrid book, and it's coming out from Trio House Press, which is a Minneapolis press, and it's going to be available for my last month as the inaugural Poet Laureate of Minneapolis, and I'm pretty grateful to them and excited about it.
Yeah. And then 2025 on the horizon is you being in Montana.
Yeah, I'm going to be able to spend quite a bit of time in Montana. I'll come and go. And then after that, I'm going to take some darn time off.
There you go.
I'm going to go to Alaska to Story Knife Writers Retreat, which is a huge treat for myself, to spend time in a women's writing retreat in Alaska, in little cabins with moose around us and a volcano across the bay. And I'm pretty excited about it.
I was at Alaska for ACES. I don't know, what is that? American Indian Science and Engineering. I took students up there, and oh my goodness, it is. I don't think there's a prettier place on earth, like other than maybe Menominee and Navajo reservations. But Alaska, the water there, you can see the bottom, and we were on this glacier, and it just was an amazing experience. So I think you
make me really want to go. So.
Yes. Very soon you'll be there enjoying it. And
looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
But it's been great to be in Minneapolis for the year. It's just been great. I haven't had to leave much, and that's a huge experience for me because for the past 10 years I've been traveling a lot for work. So,
well, Minneapolis is such a beautiful city. I think especially lately we've sort of been under fire for, what kind of city are we, because we've been under the spotlight. But it's so easy to go out and enjoy wild spaces and rivers. And I know that you love Duluth and you like to go up there to, refill your batteries. So do you get to help pick the next Minneapolis
I
Poet
do not.
Laureate?
I have nothing to do with the next Minneapolis Poet Laureate. They're on their own. No, I will, of course, I'm happy to talk to anybody. The applications go in mid-November, and we'll know sometime at the beginning of 2025 who the new Poet Laureate is. And I hope they have a heck of a time enjoying themselves. This is just such a great city for poetry. And, there's so many opportunities to work with all ages with poetry here. And that's what I've been able to do. So it's been fun.
That's excellent.
Well, tell us a little bit about your pop-ups that will be happening.
Oh, yeah. One of the last projects I'm doing with the Poet Laureate is we're doing a city pop-up, and my poetry collaborator is Tyra Pear, and they're going to help me to work on an all-ages engaged couple of hours of poetry at the Indian Center on December 5th. So we're hoping folks will be able to come to that. And at the end of that day, the city is hosting a celebration of my Poet Laureate year at the Indian Center as well. So
mark your calendar.
Yeah, so those things will be going on. In between, I've been doing a build a poem activity where I have folks come to me and they answer 4 questions, and then I read my lines of poetry and they read their answers, and we're building a poem together. I've been collecting these from all over Minneapolis, and
new book.
It's going to be one poem, and I'm going to present it to the city of Minneapolis. I'm really looking forward to that part too, because it's been a wonderful experience. So people who are like, no, I can't do poetry, and they come over and together we make a poem, and they're like, that gave me chills, or that was so fun, that was so good. They come back and listen to other people doing it. We did it at Awamni. I've done it in North and in Eloise Butler Wildflower Garden along Bade-Makaska, and now the weather's changing, so I'm going to try and get into the library at Franklin and maybe one more on the Ave somewhere.
Oh, awesome. I feel like once people have an experience of something, they're just more, you're more likely to do it and be inspired. So you're inspiring people all over Minneapolis, and that's just so beautiful. And
well, thanks.
You're amazing to be our poetry leader here in the city.
Our inaugural poetry,
right?
Poet Laureate, and just in your quiet, beautiful way that you work.
I got kind of revved up. It was fun. And I'm working with 20 poets that I've commissioned too. So we'll see what they read in the spring of 2025. We'll give a couple readings. We'll see what they've written when they read their poems.
So we're running out of time, but we were gifted these beautiful recipe cards.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about these?
Yeah, they came from an exhibit that I curated. It took 4 years. It was an incredible amount of research. The exhibit was at Amherst College, and it included books from their special collection in Native literature from the library and artworks, as well as artworks that I encouraged them to commission or acquire from Native artists from the Northeast. So I learned a lot about the Northeast folks that lived there and was especially grateful to the Nipmuc Nation. I've got a lot of recipes in the show. So we have a book coming out from that in spring of 2025 called Boundless, Abundance in Native Art and Literature. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say I also am curating an exhibit at the Minnesota Marine Art Museum in Winona. Gorgeous space, 5 Minnesota artists. So, and their literature. So books by artists who make books.
And where are they located? Because I don't.
They're in Winona.
Winona, right. Mm-hmm. I knew they were technically.
Right on the river. Yeah. Gorgeous building, wonderful staff.
Yes.
Yeah. And the artists are Tashia Hart, Jonathan Thunder, Gwen Westerman, Cole Red Horse Taylor, and that's the group.
Yes.
Oh, sounds terrible. How
I know. And their books. So the books, it's the Literary Arts Project at the MMAM.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we look forward to following your continued career, and thanks so much for being on the show.
I'm so grateful. I can't believe we were chatting all this time. It was really fun. Thank you. So glad to have you here too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Books Are Good Medicine. Subscribe to our channel on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also visit our website, booksaregoodmedicine.com, to find episodes and resources, or to send us a comment. This podcast is sponsored by the Shakopee, Metawakan Sioux community and produced by Goff Public. Our theme music is Stomp Dance by Blue Dog. The opinions expressed on the Books Are Good Medicine podcast by its co-hosts and guests are their own in their personal capacities and do not necessarily reflect the views of any organization with whom they are affiliated or of the podcast sponsor.